Great day. Welcome to my channel. My name is Felicia Morgan. Welcome. It is good to see you. Thanks for coming back. And if you're new here, I appreciate you so much. This channel is dedicated to teaching young women how to thrive in their relationship with God. And so today I'm continuing my Woman of the Month feature. And today we're talking about Esther. Okay, so today we are talking about Esther, and she's a little bit more well known in the Bible. She has a whole book dedicated to her story. Now, the book of Esther is very interesting, and it's one that I always, well, not always, but it's one that I have read quite a bit, and it's very interesting. I love it. It's very inspirational. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Her story is found in the book of Esther in the Old Testament. So as I was reading the book of Esther, there were three things that stood out to me today that I wanted to go ahead and share with you about Esther. The first thing being that she lived in a time with a pagan ruler. Now this should be very relatable to us because we live in a time where we have a lot of rulers, authority figures, people of influence, and they don't always do things the way that God would have them to do things, or that we believe that God would have them to do things. And yet we have to live by faith. We have to follow God. It's not about what they do, but it's about us setting the example. It's about us being ambassadors of Christ and people of influence, that we can influence others that maybe have other positions of influence, and not letting them dictate how we act. And so we can learn in the book of Esther that yes, just because other people are acting up and just because other people are not doing right doesn't necessarily mean we have to. Now, Esther didn't do everything right, but God was still able to use her. God still, graced her in that situation so that he could get the glory in the end. And that's what's important. It's about not just being subject to your mistakes, your failures, and the people around you, but remembering that, hey, I got to do things the way that God has called me to do. The next thing that we learn from Esther is the power of prayer and fasting. When her uncle came to her and said, listen, your people are in trouble and we need help, she didn't just say, I got the answer. She was like, no, tell my people to fast for 3 days. I'm gonna pray, I'm gonna fast as well, and then you were gonna do this thing. So we learned how powerful prayer and fasting is. I didn't always know how powerful prayer and fasting is, but God has shown me over the past 2 years like a lifestyle of prayer and fasting, a lifestyle of fasting. It's not always comfortable. It is not always what I want to do because your girl likes to eat, okay? But it is a way to get breakthrough, not because we move God, but because we're able to clear out our mind. We're able to humble ourselves. We should be humbling ourselves doing fasting. And then we can hear more clearly. We can hear what God's been trying to tell us all along. So learn the lifestyle and the power of a lifestyle of prayer and fasting. And the last thing that I was inspired by Esther in her story was that she was hesitant, but she did it anyway. First of all, she was encouraged by her uncle that it's not about you. Okay, you got to think of the bigger picture because you have been positioned for such a time as this. So we get that from her. And then we also see that despite her fear, she was strengthened by God. She was strengthened by God through her prayer and fasting to go ahead and do what she needed to do despite her own life, despite how she felt, despite the discomfort. She went ahead and did what was necessary. And that is so important because no matter what fear hits you, no matter what discouragement you feel, you have to do what God has placed on your heart because he has positioned you for such a time as this. One of the things that's so powerful about the book of Esther that it does not mention God. They don't talk about God outright. They don't mention the name of God, but he's all throughout the book. And we have to remember that. We have to remember that even if we don't talk about God in our life, he should be represented in our life. He should be represented in our actions. That's one of the biggest things we got to get from the book of Esther, is that you don't always have to say God this and God that, but people should feel it, they should see it, and they should experience it through your life because of your actions and because of the fruit that you produce. So I hope that you are also inspired by the book of Esther. I encourage you to read it if you haven't. And if you have, go ahead and drop in the comments and tell me some things that Esther has inspired you to do or that you have learned from Esther. All right, I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.